This marks the beginning of a new era, one filled with these girls called Uma. Wait, that is the wrong script. Sony, however, in the distant future, the year 2000, would unleash this black tower-shaped console known only as the PlayStation 2. Then on September the 13th, 2001, Namco and the soon-to-be-named Project Aces would release Ace Combat 4 Shattered Skies in Japan, with the North American and EU crowds getting it at a later date. This game would be the beginning of what the fans would start to call the Holy Trinity. The original intention for Ace Combat 4 was to be a soft reboot of the entire franchise after the lukewarm reception to Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere, which is understandable with its sudden shift in tone from the lighthearted arcade action to a literal Ghost in the Shell level mindfuckery with its story. But now the game would return to its arcade roots with fast-paced action and a linear story. Ace Combat 4 would be the highest-selling Ace Combat game with 2.64 million copies sold worldwide, and it held this record for 20 years before being dethroned by Ace Combat 7, which has a rough estimate of around about 7 million copies, but that can be chalked up to the multi-platform nature of Ace Combat 7 versus the platform-exclusive release that was Ace Combat 4. Now, before I start the video, I wanted to talk about the game itself and one of the things that I messed up in my original video, because I am not afraid to admit that I made a mistake, and that is with the aspect ratio of the footage. The Ace Combat games, along with some other games that are on the PlayStation 2, have the ability to be played in a native 16:9 widescreen aspect ratio, and this only affects things that are rendered in the game's engine. UI and cutscenes are still going to run at the native 4:3 aspect ratio, but it can give the gameplay a very clear picture on modern screens. Emulators like PCSX2 can also add hacks like the 16:9 widescreen hacks on top of the native running of the game to widen the field of view just a little bit more. This can break first-person perspectives in certain games, but in specific for Ace Combat, it does prevent the warping that will happen when the plane rolls and 4:3 is stretched out to 16:9. For now, I'm going to show you the difference between 4:3, stretched out to 16:9, and 16:9 native. Yeah, proper 16:9 looks a whole lot better. Now, to make this video a little bit more fun and challenging for me as a player, I tasked myself with playing the game on the hardest difficulty available to a new game, which is hard, and we have to try to get an S rank on every single mission available to us. But before we get into it, we need to know why we are here. The asteroid Ulysses 1994 XF04 threatens all of Strangereal, so in June of 1994, Stonehenge, or Space Guard Turret Network, was set up in the Hades Desert by the Federation of Central Asia, or FCU. This array was designed to eliminate the fragments of the asteroid. On July 8, 1999, the fragments would begin to fall from the sky. While Stonehenge Array was able to stop some of the incoming fragments, it would not be able to stop all of them, with one of the railguns being decommissioned from a fragment striking one of the turrets. The remaining fragments would cause utter devastation to the continent of Asia, causing over 500,000 deaths, and crippling critical infrastructure, causing untold amounts of economic damage to the region. The impacts would also displace many of the people in the region, causing an immense refugee crisis. One of the nations that was looked at during this crisis was the large nation of Erusia. They managed to take in 200,000 refugees before not being able to handle any more in their nation. By the year 2000, they began to impose restrictions on visas, preventing admission to the country. This would cause widespread condemnation of Erusia with boycotts of products, causing damage to their economy. Meanwhile, in the border camps, many of the refugees would succumb to illness and crime. The economic and population burden would eventually bubble over, causing the eventual invasion of the neutral nation of San Salvation, and later the capture of the Stonehenge Array. The FCU would condemn this invasion and would form the Independent State Allied Forces, or ISAF for short, with concerns over what Erusia's plan for the railgun array was. Using a combined strike with both ground troops and ISAF strike squadrons, the FCU would attempt to destroy Stonehenge. Erusia did not want to lose a key strategic facility and would turn the railguns against them, using them as a weapon. This proved effective as it destroyed a majority of the ISAF squadrons, forcing a retreat to the city of Las Canas. Not wanting to admit defeat, ISAF and the FCU attempted a secondary strike at Stonehenge. This time they were met with Eruseans' 156th Tactical Fighter Wing, or Yellow Squadron. These aces would make short work of ISAF aircraft, and with complete air dominance, the victories would begin to pile up, with ISAF being forced to retreat to the islands of North Point. Now this is where you come in as Mobius 1. As the only member of the 118th Tactical Fighter Wing, your job is to take off from the carrier Fort Grace, as there have been enemy bombers spotted heading towards Newfield Island. However, you are not going to be defending much without an aircraft, unless you want to chuck a rock up at a high-flying bear. Returning from earlier Ace Combat games is the ability for the player to purchase aircraft after their unlock mission is completed, with credits earned from completing missions with higher scores and grades. This makes the total available licensed aircraft that can be used 20, with one fictional aircraft that has a specific unlock requirement that we will get to when we talk about the bonuses. New to Ace Combat 4, however, is the ability to purchase secondary weapons for your aircraft. These weapons can be selected before a mission starts and offers a way to change up the playstyle beyond the normal cannons and standard missiles. These can range from powerful multi-lock missiles that allow you to attack multiple targets at once, or allowing your aircraft to fit a multi-role configuration with bombs that let them strike at ground targets. But there are also some hilariously overpowered missiles like the QAAM, which seem to be capable of hitting targets long after they initially missed. Before the missions actually start, I'd like to talk about the unique framing device that they use for the missions. There is a story that is told alongside the main campaign. Instead of these elaborate animated cutscenes, you instead get a hand-drawn set of stills, with a voiceover of a man who talks about his experience during the Continental War, his experiences with Yellow Squadron, and what it was really like being on the ground as a civilian child during this time. This gives a very human perspective to things and is in stark contrast to the way that the gameplay is. While we are flying around raining death from above in high-octane missions, these cutscenes show how much the war affects the innocent lives of people living in these locations. But it also shows that the enemy that we are fighting are also people too. Now, the first thing to note gameplay-wise is the graphical leap from the PS1 era to the PS2 era, and it is staggering, with Ace Combat 4 still looking good to this very day. Even if the models aren't as crisp and as clear as we would see in later titles, it still looks good. And Ace Combat 4 also has this crisp and clear design to its UI. It gives the player every single bit of information they would need. It does its best to mimic the real world, emulating potentially what a pilot may see when piloting their aircraft. The audio was another thing that stands out with Ace Combat 4. While the game was not 100% accurate to the real world, it still sounds amazing, from the sounds of turning on your afterburners causing that low rumbling noise, to the sounds of launching your missiles and having them explode. It is backed also with an amazing soundtrack that can change entirely how a mission feels. The other thing that they added audio-wise is voices for the enemies and friendly units, and I'm not talking about the major ones that are key to the story like in Ace Combat 3, but the enemies and allies have voice lines, be it when they perform a feat or you do something. It really gives a certain charm to the game that is combined with the one voice that will guide us through everything in the game. Our AWACS, Sky-Eye. He is the only character that is given a name outside of a generic squadron callsign, and he mostly acts as our mission guidance, often giving mission updates and the like. With the power of the PlayStation 2 and also the fact that we are not flying a coffin fighter, the player gains a new viewpoint, the immersive first-person cockpit view. Now, it's not a perfect cockpit with all the dials flashing and moving, but when you were a kid playing this for the first time in 2001, it was truly immersive and impressive to see. But that wasn't the only camera that was added into the game. There's also the munitions tracking camera. If the player continues to hold down the secondary fire button after firing either a standard missile or a special munition, the camera will track the last munition until it impacts or misses, often doing the latter because sometimes the missiles just really don't want to hit their targets. I don't know why. Another major thing to talk about is the flight model for Ace Combat. It often changes between the games, with Ace Combat 4 taking a lot of its DNA from Ace Combat 3's flight model, which was a little bit more realistic, but tweaking it to fit a more action-oriented style with extremely quick roll rates. But otherwise, the plane will handle as one would expect, with gradual acceleration and deceleration, but speed that will bleed as one performs high G maneuvers. The first two missions are designed similar to tutorial, and while the game does feature one, this is more to get the player used to the way that the game works in a low-stress environment. The two S ranks for these first two missions are also extremely easy to get, as there are so few enemies that just spending a little extra bit of time destroying auxiliary stuff or other fighters will net enough points to get the S ranks. The third mission features us bombing some radar relays in the mountains, but also introduces the mechanic that is central to succeeding in Ace Combat 4. And yes, it does exist in the previous missions, but you're not really ever going to use it, and that is the return line. When looking at the radar, there's a small dotted line on one of the 4 sides. Crossing over this line during a mission will give the player a minigame to land their aircraft, which can be skipped of course if you press start, but it will also let them swap out the secondary weapons and repair their aircraft if they are playing on the lower difficulties. It will also pause time while landed and while you are selecting your weapons. And like I mentioned, there isn't really much of a reason to use the return line in the first few missions. Your aircraft, be it the F4 or the F5s that you get, don't have many secondary weapons to swap to in the first place. Also, the fact that most ground targets take a single missile to destroy and there are very few enemies, there is really no need to have to go back and restock unless you just randomly take a missile and you really want to repair yourself. And unless you are just spamming missiles and bombs, you're not going to run out of ammunition either. So there's really no point on using the return line. It's just more forced onto you. That way you know the mechanic is there because it is required at the end of the mission. The S rank is also really easy to obtain, and that is just requiring taking out the 8 fighters that show up so that way the objective is progressed. There isn't much of a panic as the timer for these first few missions is actually pretty generous. There's also a unique interaction with this mission that is mostly seen in SP playthroughs, as once you cross the return line you'll have to do a small landing minigame. If you are using a carrier-capable aircraft like the F4, you will have to land on a carrier, but if you are using an aircraft that is not carrier-capable like the S-37A, you'll land on an airfield instead. It's actually a pretty cool little tiny detail that they actually added in. Now I'm going to take a little bit of time to gush about a mission that I absolutely adore, the 4th mission, and it isn't because of the mission structure or anything like that, it is because of the song that is used. Blockade is one of my favorite songs in the entire soundtrack, and that is a soundtrack that is just absolutely full of bangers. There's something almost peaceful about the way that there's just chimes at the beginning, the E767s are jamming you, which causes your radar to be just a giant blob, with some small blips that are occasionally showing through it, and slowly the song rises as you're approaching the enemy transport that is guarded by 2 F-16s. Then the song changes after a certain time has passed, with it becoming this beautiful orchestra that if timed right, can really give you a sense of freedom in the air. The jamming is cleared, there's nothing but open skies for you to fly through, but there's also a sense of triumph to it as you have now solidified yourself as a proper ace. The skies are yours for the taking now. Also, it's a song that is played in 7/4 signature, so Keiki Kobayashi comes in and hits us with a unique time signature, and it's also one of the first songs that he ever made for Ace Combat 4. But also the mission comes with a rather simple S rank, just making sure that you take out the extra fighters and the 2 767s that are in the area, and if your point total ticks over 1280, the S rank is obtained. After the transports are downed, we have properly disrupted one of their means of supplying the Eiger fleet. Now it's time to get rid of the one thing that the enemy needs even more, fuel and oil. Mission 5 will throw you a new mission type that is used for a majority of the game, and one that if you are trying to do S ranks on everything will either be a thorn in your side or will be the easiest thing on the planet, and those are the score attack missions. The basic premise of this mission type is that in the top left hand corner of the screen, the player is given a score threshold. This is the bare minimum to pass with a C rank, with the amount needed changing depending on the difficulty, with the easier 2 difficulties requiring significantly less to get a passing grade. Now in order to get the score you have to destroy the enemy, and each enemy in the playable area is assigned a color that you can see in the briefing menus and on radar. After destroying a target, the player is awarded the score value tied to them. These missions overall are often pretty long and will most likely require a trip back over the return line if you want to obtain the highest score possible. Now, personally to me, I felt like these missions were more designed to elongate the playtime just a little bit more, as instead of destroying things labeled target to progress like in older titles where the player would most likely be able to just make a beeline straight for them, they feature larger scale battles with the player having to destroy as much stuff as possible within a time limit that has to tick down to 0 for the progress to occur. This can lead to the player flying around in circles for minutes on end if they are efficient at getting score. However, the missions do their job, as it feels like I said you are in a massive battle and you are on the offensive, and you're just trying to cause as much damage as possible instead of doing calculated and precise strikes. The S rank is rather easy to get, as the F-16 is available by this stage, and it is way faster than the base F-4 and comes with UGBS as its secondary weapon at stock. If the player chooses, they can also use XAGMs, which are still effective, but when the enemies are clustered together, bombs work much better due to their blast radius. Now we have left their oil supply in ruins, and we have also polluted another reef in Strange Reel. We are really just going to create their version of Greenpeace at this point, aren't we? But the Eruseans are not happy with this, as we just crippled their supply, and they send out the infamous Yellow Squadron to make sure none of us get back to base. Now the thing about this encounter is that the Yellow Squadron cannot be shot down at this point. They are invincible. You can hit them, but it does no damage, and Sky Eye will even reprimand you for not disengaging. So it's a waste of time to try and fight them and will most likely end up with you getting shot down. Instead, the player should just make a beeline and get across the return line as fast as possible just to end the mission. We can now attack the invincible Eiger fleet while they're in the port, and they have a little chance to escape from us. Of course, before the mission, we purchased the A-10 Thunderbolt, and I think we all know the reason why. It is also the only aircraft at this point in the game that can carry UGBLs into the mission. Those will be key to our victory as they can wipe out most of the ships and their substructures in a single bomb, which will drop the time that we are actually doing the mission by quite a lot. One of the rather unique things about this mission is that as you are destroying things, Project Aces went and actually named every single one of the major ships and submarines for the Eiger fleet. And you can hear that as Sky Eye will call out the ones that you have sunk.
Destroyer Taish, sunk. Submarine Beowulf Pi, sunk. Cruiser Beluga, sunk. Cruiser Kolga, sunk. Cruiser Fenris, sunk.
This gives to me a feeling that you are really making an impact on this dangerous fleet, instead of them just being nameless and mindless boats that are just sitting out in a harbor that you've decided to blow up. Now that we have managed to make sure that the Eiger fleet is no longer a threat, we have obtained another S rank, which this mission is probably the easiest S rank ever. We sing the Usian national anthem or the hymn of liberty, and we fly off into the very, very gray skies. One of the things that we are also known for in the franchise is ruining renewable energy sources all across the world. This time the enemy is using a solar power plant to feed their energy needs, and it's our job to make sure that doesn't happen. But there is a major issue. This solar power plant is right in the firing distance of Stonehenge, but ISAF is feeling a little cocky right now, so they send us right into the danger zone. Of course, I chose the F-14 since it can carry either bombs or XMAAs if needed. Now here's one of the things that I did not expect in this playthrough, and that is that the flak guns really freaking hurt. Normally I never get hit by them, but for some reason in this playthrough and even the SP playthrough that I did, they had me on lock and they were hitting me constantly to the point where sometimes they would leave me with like 60% damage. It's ridiculous. Ow, that flak hurts. What the? You are just little shit. Holy, what the hell? That flak gun did 20. Target is knocked out, and I do recommend getting the points required for the S rank before doing so, as the solar panels can be knocked out with a short burst of cannon fire, and the enemies in the latter half can be quite annoying to shoot down. The mission has an update as, surprise, surprise, the Eruseans have turned those big railguns in our direction and start filling the air with unique shells that explode, meaning that either we were destroying the meteor fragments with some advanced time delay shell, or Erusia has managed to make one that can be fired from a railgun. Either way, it's terrifying. So in order to avoid literal orbs of death in the sky, Sky Eye instructs us to dive under 2,000 feet, which means turning the mission into a pseudo ravine run. You can poke up out of the ravine when the rounds are not impacting overhead, but generally I found it easier just to fly through the ravine, and if you're short on points, there are a couple of helicopters that can help obtain an S rank, but they are towards the end and those can be a little bit hard to shoot at times, especially when you're trying to avoid the literal death orbs in the sky. But now that we have crossed the return line, we learn that we have lost a lot of our aircraft in that mission. Good job, ISAF. But there is a plan, and it involves sending a recon satellite into orbit. Where we are launching it from? The Kimona Islands. Of course, Erusia doesn't want that, so they send everything to stop it, including the Yellow Squadron. Now, I think everybody knows this song if you have played Ace Combat. Kimona is an iconic song for those that have played through the franchise. It has an energy to it that really gives you two feelings: that this is a chaotic furball of a mission, but that you are also the hero that is starting to help swing the tide of battle. It gives me the same feeling that Fire Youngman did in Ace Combat 2. It just is amazing to listen to. Also, this is the point where I will tell you to take a look at the channel Naso. They do recreations of Ace Combat missions inside of DCS World, and the one for Kimona is just beautiful. It is framed as if it's like an 80s style cartoon, and it's just a beautiful thing to watch. It will be linked in the cards and in the description for you guys to go take a look at. The mission itself, however, is just a score attack mission, but one that is focused around dogfighting. As I mentioned earlier, Erusia did send up Yellow Squadron to assist them. They can be quite annoying during this fight, however the player can make a choice to engage them. But I will tell you they cannot be shot down in a traditional sense. They are coded to be invincible. Trust me, I tried with a QAM equipped plane, and their planes are very much not able to be properly shot down. However, hitting one with a missile does send them fleeing out of the airspace, and that does give you some dialogue that showed that you damaged him, but in the wise words of Count, that bastard is moving in a way that minimizes the damage even when hit. Now that we have spent a lot of time spinning around in circles trying to shoot down as much as we can, if the player gets to the score threshold, the enemy will send in a set of B-2 bombers, which radar is not able to detect. But Sky Eye gives us some good advice.
B-2 bombers approaching from the west. Intercept them before they reach the launch site.
Negative contact, nothing on my radar.
Look harder. The B-2s are difficult to detect on radar. They're stealth.
I love that tip. Look harder. Use your damn eyes, man. Yeah, come on guys, just use your eyes. Look for the missing pixels up in the sky. However, the game is nice enough to point out where the bombers were coming from, and they aren't hard to take down even if my first pass only took out a couple of them. Once they are taken care of, it's back to the main dogfight over the rocket base to secure the S rank, which overall isn't too difficult, especially if you do not give chase to the Yellow Squadron early on, and also down the C-17 and 767 that are just flying around the edges of the islands. The rocket launches safely once the timer runs out, and one of my favorite things to hear is the pure awe in the pilots' voices as they watch the rocket take off from the base, and then in the debriefing where you hear everybody cheering.
3, 2, 1, ignition. Liftoff. Whoa! Yeah! All systems are in the green. Rocket has reached 40,000 feet. It is now immune to enemy action. Thanks to you, the launch was a success.
It gives a real feeling that this was one of the turning points in the Continental War, where Erusia is starting to lose their grip, and thanks to the player, they are starting to slowly drive back the enemy back to their homeland. Speaking of driving them back, we get a D-Day landing type mission right after, where our objective is to provide coast air support for troops that are landing on the beaches below. The map is separated into 3 beaches, with each one having different clusters of enemies. Personally, I found the third beach was one of the easier ones to attack first, as it has these radar arrays that are worth a lot of points, and behind the main action there was a grouping of launchers that when taken out will inflate the point score. Of course, our main goal for getting an S rank is to get as high of a score as possible before the mission updates, as the S rank itself requires 4,400 points. There will be 6 A10s worth a total of 600 points after the update, and after downing a few of them, a few escort fighters will show up and you can destroy them for extra points if needed. Now, this is where I admit that I failed the first time around. I came so close to getting the point total that I needed. I fell short of the goal by an entire 40 points. I needed 4,400. What did I get? Oh my god, if I would have gotten like one more bomb off, I would have had it. No. If I had destroyed one more AA system on the ground, I would have had it. Thankfully, I got the S rank on the second try just from being more efficient at managing my weapons and not spending so much time on a single section. Now we have our foothold on the region, and we can start the very slow pushback against the Erusian forces, even if they still have those massive railguns at their disposal. But for now, we have to take care of their bases in this natural fortress-like region, which was perceived to be impenetrable, and we are going to penetrate it, and penetrate it hard. And in order to do that, we need a plane with a lot of bombs, but that is also fast. So once again, we take our F-15 into the jungle to see if we can increase our grip on the mainland. Now, most of the bases in this natural fortress are hidden away in canyon-like areas, which means a lot of low passes and avoiding turning your plane into something that would be displayed in the Smithsonian. Overall, it isn't very difficult, even if the controls are pretty twitchy at times. But because Erusia still has the giant-ass railguns off in the distance, they will occasionally chuck a few rounds in our direction and force us to dive under 2,000 feet, which one of the pilots gives a very sarcastic response to the order from Sky Eye.
Direct hit from one of those and you're toast!
Below 2,000 feet? What do they expect us to do? Fly through the mountains?
The canyons, you idiot. What do they expect us to do? Fly through the mountains?
Maintain a high
No,
rate
they
of
expect
fire.
you to use the terrain to mask, which is called flying into new canyons. Like, you can have fun dying, I guess. I will tickle the belly of my plane on the tops of the trees if I have to in order to avoid the instant death ball. One of the most satisfying things, however, about this mission is the fact that the player can attack these VTOL bases. Often these bases are long, vertical-shaped caves, so that way the Harriers stationed there can take off vertically. They are vulnerable to bombs while they are still in the caves, and it is so ridiculously fun to swoop in, toss a bomb down one, and watch the point totals just skyrocket. However, if they do manage to get up in the air, they do fly in predetermined paths until engaged, so they shouldn't be too hard to take out since their maneuverability is pretty limited due to their speed being pretty slow. The S rank for this mission was not hard to achieve at all. There's just a high saturation of enemies and high value targets to attack, and it actually left me with quite a lot of time just to fly around and do nothing, except for avoiding getting shot down by Stonehenge whenever it would just pelt the area with its rounds. In the next mission, we get to learn that a few scientists that were working on Stonehenge have decided to defect to ISAF member states, and they are flying home on 2 civilian airliners. Of course, Erusia does not want us learning the secret to destroying the array, so they send wave after wave of fighters to shoot down the aircraft, with one of them taking damage to where it cannot fly too high. The one pilot that speaks to Sky Eye throughout the mission will have a name that is familiar to those that have played the earlier Ace Combat games. Her name is Nagase. Yes, the same Kei Nagase that helped us during the Yuzhin Rebel Front conflict in Ace Combat 2. It is a neat callback to that game and lets us know that she found another job after the events of the game. Mission-wise, it isn't too difficult as the enemy aircraft do spawn at varying altitudes, so you'll be engaging between higher and lower altitudes. There are 2 win conditions for the mission: either you down all the enemy aircraft, or the civilian liners make it across the return line. The civilian liners themselves can only take anywhere between 1 and a few missiles. There's no definite number as it changes depending on the difficulty. But thankfully, the AI, if you shoot at them or fly anywhere near the enemy AI, they will pause all of their actions because their aggro will be placed onto you. Overall, the S rank isn't too difficult, as destroying every single aircraft that is shooting at the liners no matter what will give you the points that you will need. But in doing this, we also learn valuable information about the railgun array, and it allows us to formulate a plan of attack. The assault on Stonehenge is a rather simplistic mission and first starts with us diving down below 2,000 meters, because the game starts us above that when the railguns that they tell us to avoid are right there. This will allow us to also sweep in and take out the 2 SAM sites before getting close enough to Stonehenge where its jammer starts to activate. Now, in order to take out the jammer that sits in the center, as it does disable our ability to lock onto it with missiles, it is best destroyed with your cannons. Of course, you can probably kill it with indirect fire just using unlocked missiles, but that is something that I decided not to do as I just wanted the easiest route, and it allows us to get our missiles back online. But for now, instead of attacking the main array, in order to help secure the S rank, take out all of the SAMs and anti-air around the turrets, and also take out the set of aircraft that launch from the nearby airfield. This will guarantee the S rank. As for the turrets themselves, we have a certain method to take them out. Each of the railguns is divided into 3 pieces that can only be hit from specific angles. The barrel, which I will say is the worst one to attack, as no matter which way I shot at it, it just doesn't get hit, and often my missiles would just miss and it's swinging around wildly. The area just behind the turret, which can be shot when the turret is facing perpendicular to the player, and this area is really easy to hit, especially with missiles and cannons, often taking a short burst of cannon fire and 2 missiles to be destroyed. And the base, which can be hit when the turret is rotating, and the little tiny legs have opened up towards where the core sits. Slowly we manage to pick off the turrets one by one, and now the fearsome array is destroyed. This leaves the enemies in a state of panic as their grip on the continent at this point is broken. Stonehenge is gone, and now ISAF can control the skies. So of course Erusia will send out the Yellow Squadron after us, but if one was watching all of the cutscenes, one mentioned that Yellow 4, the only female in the group, blew up with her plane in a state of disrepair. that engine really needed to be replaced. This would lead to her downfall, as during the dogfight she stupidly did a cobra maneuver in front of me while I had a lock on her. I have no idea why she chose to do it there, and a lot of the yellow team members do that when you fight them. Like, they'll just pull a cobra right in front of you while you have a lock on them, like they're trying to be Tom Cruise or something. But she took 2 missiles to the top of her plane, and with that, the once invincible Yellow Squadron has now lost a member. Now comes 2 of what I see as the most boring filler missions in all of Ace Combat 4, that being Safe Return and Breaking Arrows. Now, these missions aren't anything super special and are sort of a wind down after the adrenaline of taking out the Stonehenge array. They mostly serve as ways to push the story forward, while giving you a little bit of suspense, as the former mission mentions something that is very important to the end of the game. Also, one of the details that I would like to point out is the change in the briefing music. After the Stonehenge assault, the briefing's music will change from the usual to a much more upbeat song, and it gives the vibe that the war is going really well for us and that the operations ahead are securing our victory.
Here is the current SITREP and your orders for deployment, effective immediately. Enemy agents destroyed our early warning radar.
Safe Return sees the player flying around in the most gray mission possible. The skies are gray, the ground is gray, and it is snowing. There is a U-2 spy plane that is returning from its mission, but is also damaged, so it's flying right into a net of radar jammers set up by Eruseans. The player is tasked with taking enough of them out to allow the usage of navigation radar. So the game becomes hunting for the pixel that looks a little bit different, as the very limited color palette of the mission does make it sometimes quite hard to see what is a balloon or what is just some spit on my monitor. Overall, the balloons themselves don't take much to be knocked down, as it's just a very short burst of cannon fire, and destroying around 24 of them will guarantee you the S rank. Now, I recommend that you get as close to the S rank as possible, because after the timer runs down, the spy plane has reached the radar net and can start flying through it. But Eruseans sends a squadron of fighters to shoot down the U-2, and it is our job to intercept them. This is where I made a grave mistake. I chose to fly the Japanese F-2 fighter, which doesn't have the best air-to-air equipment on, and hard mode makes the enemies a little bit harder to hit and more aggressive towards me. It was a fearsome fight with me taking a ton of damage. Eventually, I got them down to 1, and I was locked in a dangerous one-circle fight against an F-15E, which is much more agile than what my little poor attacker is. One stray burst of cannon fire or a single missile to my back and I am done for. So I pull my aircraft into the vertical and use my afterburners to get away from him. Then I slow my aircraft down, pushing it into a steep dive, where I fire off 2 missiles and pray he doesn't get a lock on me, and got him.
All bandits confirmed shut down.
That was a smart choice. Let's go. Gosh, that was close, but it was a mission success, and we gained some valuable intel about something the Eruseans have planned called Megalith. Now it is time for a mission that is just truly filler fluff, and that is Broken Arrows. Eruseans has started to launch cruise missiles at our ground troops from somewhere in the Arctic, and it is our job to intercept them. This mission is fairly easy to do, even if on the hard difficulty. The missiles do dodge just a little bit more, but waiting for them to level out, which normally happens after they accelerate away, is the best way to take care of them. Using an aircraft with XMAA or XLAA can also work, but also QOMs will work really well. In order to S rank the mission, the player does have to destroy the highly experimental XB-70 bomber that is flying around the north side of the map. But also during the final phase against the singular, much more maneuverable missile, there will be 2 F-22s. Taking them out will make sure that the S rank is obtained, even if Sky Eye gets a little bit mad at you. Now, I will admit that it took me a lot longer than I had wanted to when it comes to actually shooting down this missile. I don't know why, it just kept dodging everything I threw at it, and eventually I did get it to where one missile would impact and it exploded in a beautiful fireball. But now the ground troops are safe, and we can move on to the final set of missions in this game. With Eruseans being on its final legs, we can take the war to their land. San Salvacion was one of the first areas that was invaded by Eruseans at the beginning of the Continental War. Of course, in a city that is forcibly occupied, there's bound to be resistance, with that resistance actually being the one that the young boy talks about in the interludes with the barkeep's daughter. They have cut the lights on the city so that way ISAF can properly attack it. This works, but also has a major negative effect, and that is on the player. It is really fucking dark. Like, there is dark missions here and there, but even I have the brightness and contrast adjusted in the emulator itself, and when I was recording it, it was still hard as hell to see. It doesn't help that I use an OLED monitor, so the effects of the darkness are far more exaggerated, making it so I am always one accidental twitch motion away from becoming an imprint on the ground. Now, the mission itself is a mixed ground and air attack mission with more of a focus on ground targets. It is really standard stuff, and in order to guarantee the S rank for this mission, the player has to get at least 3120 points or a high C rank before the timer runs out. This can be achieved not only by attacking both of these smaller ground-focused combat zones, but also wiping out the airport, which has a ton of high-value targets. But also taking out the Yellow Squadron will help out as well, as they are flying around and are worth a ton of points. The only struggle I had was with the Yellows. They do have an AI that is better at dodging, so there is a chance that your fight with them could either last for a few seconds, or they could just end up absorbing all of your time in the air, and it is best to leave them for last. Sadly, the first time I did the mission, I did not get the S rank and actually fell short of it with only an A rank, but Mama didn't raise no quitter, so we dove right back in and were far more efficient with our missiles, getting us a ton of score early on and netting us up to that coveted high C rank that we needed. Then I proceeded to do something very dumb and ran out of all of my ammunition during the final section against the intruding Tu-160 Blackjacks and had to gun the last bit of them down, but I got the S rank at the end by 10 whole points. Talk about luck, but now the city is liberated and we have a long march into Erusean territory. On our way to Erusia, we have to break through the last bastion of defense that the country has. That is the Whiskey Corridor, which is a long strip of desert that has many fortified military bases set up on it. We are to provide casts for the troops down below. The mission itself isn't very difficult, as the enemies are clustered together, so any explosive with a good radius can make short work of them all. The timer itself is also very generous, and it gives the player a lot of time to get what they need done, even allowing multiple trips across the return line to resupply. Most of the air defenses that you will face in this mission are just tornadoes and A-10s that are attacking the ground troops. They aren't too difficult to take care of, even if they can be a bit annoying when they chase you around constantly trying to shoot missiles at you, and they are quite tanky, but overall it's just nothing that you haven't dealt with before. The S rank isn't the hardest thing to achieve either, especially if you choose an aircraft like the F-15E Strike Eagle with UGBLs, which makes short work of the clustered vehicles and bases. The way that I found to get the S rank the easiest is to attack the first cluster of vehicles, then dart towards the far back and take out the base at the northmost point of the map, then sweep back around to the east and take out the howitzer and launcher vehicles parked along the dunes. Doing that while destroying as many tanks, SAMs, and other valuable targets left me with nearly 5 whole minutes, and that is with me even doing the normal order I do things in differently this time around, with the attack at the northern base being the last thing I did. Once the timer runs out, we have broken their lines, and now it's the final march onto the capital of Erusia and the city of Farbanti, and we unlock a unique and powerful aircraft, the F-15 STOL MTD, or as they call it in the game, the F-15 Active. So of course we take that to attack the city along with the Fabes Loaded, which are the most powerful bombs in the entire game as long as you can use them properly, which I often would fail at doing because of the way that I normally bomb in Ace Combat. I am very close to the ground, and sometimes that messes with the way the bombs explode since they kind of glide in before exploding, and I would bomb a building or the area around the target but not the target itself. But that is besides the point. The mission itself is not the most difficult thing in the world to complete, and destroying most of the targets should give the player more than enough time to achieve an A rank. That includes the Ospreys that will spawn in towards the end and has the so-called leaders of Erusia evacuating the city and leaving the people of Farbanti behind. Of course, once the timer runs out, an old group of friends returns. The Yellow Squadron are here to make their last stand in defending Farbanti. The fight was difficult, their advanced maneuverability was difficult to counter. The first of the Yellows would go down when he decided to pull a Cobra in front of me for some reason. The second would go down when we tried to head on one another. The third would go down in a bit of a dogfight, but it ended when he tried to ram my plane. I guess he ran out of ammo or something. And the fourth and fifth members would go down in a barrage of missiles when I just decided to spam all my XMAAs at them. Then it is over. The war. Everything we have been fighting for. It is done in the blink of an eye. And here's where I'll point out one small discrepancy, and that is in the debrief that happens after the mission. The game states that Erusia surrendered at 1200 hours on September the 19th, but if you look at the mission stat card, the mission takes place at 1820 hours on September the 19th. So either we destroyed Erusia so badly they forgot what time it was, or Mobius is secretly a time traveler. But the fight isn't over there, as we have received intel that a group of young officers in the Erusean military have taken over the superstructure known only as Megalith. This structure is able to use missiles to knock out the remaining fragments of the Ulysses asteroid down from orbit. We have to stop it, and you can tell how serious this is in the game because the normal music is gone. It's unsettling. It really makes you feel like this is potentially the end of the world. But here we are with Megalith, and in that short intro, you heard the song that people make memes with, Rex Tramandai, and the actual song that plays in the mission is also used for memes, and that is Megalith Agnus Dei. The mission itself is set in an environment that looks straight out of the apocalypse, with meteor fragments raining down from the skies above, and a bunch of lasers flying out from Megalith itself. Now that we are fighting in the initial furball, we are going to talk about some of the musical choices that Project Aces has made for this mission. As mentioned, the song that begins this mission with the imagery of Megalith is the song Rex Tramandai, and the lyrics itself is from the 8th stanza of Dies Irae, which is often used in Requiem Mass or Funeral Mass. It is also a composition written by Mozart and is part of Mozart's Requiem, with the lyrics that follow in English. King of tremendous majesty, who freely saves those worthy ones, save me, source of mercy. This is combined with the second song that plays during the mission, which is the powerful Megalith Agnus Dei, which Agnus Dei translates to Lamb of God. This does have links to the Gospel of John, with the specific phrase referencing the title bestowed upon Jesus Christ being John 1:29, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." This could leave open interpretations that Mobius 1 is an allegory in the game for Jesus Christ, that he is going to wash away the sins of the world, which is represented by destroying Megalith, which is considered Erusean's sin, which also represents the Megalith that he is also supposed to be sacrificed upon. As I mentioned, it does leave open a lot of interpretations, and honestly it gives this whole mission a sense of climax, but is also the entire reason that Ace Combat fans have a fear of the Latin language, since every time Latin is spoken in one of the games, especially in a song, a superweapon will just appear. Now back to the mission at hand. As I mentioned, it starts out with a full-on furball, where it's the enemy draped in yellow squadron insignia like they are ghosts from the past, clashing with our newly formed Mobius squadron. It is a chaotic and frenetic fight, with aircraft flying left and right, shooting each other down, and I will say that it is recommended that you try to take down at least half of the yellow squadron yourself, because that helps you with the S rank. Once all of them are downed, we can proceed to attack the main island and the superstructure itself. Megalith is not that difficult to tackle, as it is just 3 separate tunnel runs with a generator at the end of it. Once all 3 of the generators are destroyed, the final approach unlocks, and the song changes once again to the very fitting Heaven's Gate. Also, 4 ICBMs will appear at the back of the structure. If you take all 4 of these out, you will end up with the S rank. I didn't do that on the first run, so I failed, and technically I failed this mission a grand total of 3 times, trying to get that final S rank. The second run, I fired my missiles way too early and they crashed into the ground instead of the generator, which then caused me to crash into it after desperately trying to shoot my cannons at it. It didn't work out too well. The third run I failed because my monitor has a fancy technology in it that it turns itself off if it detects that I am not sitting in front of it. It is to prevent burn-in for an OLED monitor. I was recording late at night, and because my lights were off and I was doing the gamer slouch where I'm not sitting perfectly straight up, my monitor didn't detect that I was sitting in front of it, and it turned itself off, which caused me to crash into the ground. The fourth run, thankfully, I was successful, and after the main tunnel in the middle is opened, it is a very short flight down a straight tube where the final missile sits. Put 2 missiles into it and fly out the top in a dramatic fashion, and it is done. Yuzha is finally at peace again. Then afterwards, we get a short cutscene where it is revealed that all of those interludes that you see between the missions were actually just being told by the boy, now grown up into a man, who desperately wants to reach out to Mobius 1, the only pilot to down Yellow 13, and the major reason why the war turned out the way that it did. Okay, now that we are done with the main campaign, it is time to get on to the extras, and Ace Combat 4 has quite a few unlockable things for the player to do once done with the first playthrough. In the options menu, the player has access to the CG viewer, which allows them to view all of the interlude cutscenes once again without having to play through the story a second time. Alongside the CG viewer is the return of the music player. The player can listen to any song that is featured within Ace Combat 4, and I have fond memories of recording Kimono with a small MP3 recorder when I was young because I had not discovered LimeWire. In terms of the actual gameplay modes, the Omake or Extras mode is replaced with SP Playthrough. This acts more like a traditional New Game Plus mode and allows the player to play on increased difficulties while retaining their money, purchased aircraft, and weapons. The player also has access to a free mission mode where they can choose any unlocked difficulty in aircraft, but can also choose free flight if they want to just explore the environments of Ace Combat 4 just a little bit more. Featured in the free mission and SP campaign modes is the ability to find ace pilots in every single mission. These will often help with getting S ranks in a second playthrough, and they do stay hidden on the radar until approached. They may require also working within the game's mechanics and mission structure to get them to appear like in the mission Escort, but they also offer the player the ability to buy the skin on their aircraft once they are destroyed. They can range from a rather cool skin like the F-15 Active's NASA prototype color scheme, or just make your F-5 look like Baja Blast. Defeating all of the aces in every single mission will award the player with the Yellow 13 skin for the Su-37 Flanker F. Upon completing 2 full playthroughs of the game on normal or harder with full S ranks on every mission, the player will be able to purchase the XO2 Wyvern, which is the fictional superplane of the game and is one of the 3 best aircraft in the game. Its alternate color schemes are locked behind getting all S ranks on hard and all S ranks on the expert difficulty. Speaking of the expert difficulty, if the player completes the game on the hard difficulty, they unlock the expert difficulty, and completing the game on expert unlocks the hardest difficulty in the game known as Ace, where a single missile could end one's journey. Alongside this, there is the Trials mission mode. These 5 missions are split up into 2 types of missions, Time Trials and Score Attack. Getting a B rank on these Score Attack missions will unlock the next mission, and they are as follows. Shoot balloons and ground targets while navigating a small obstacle course. Shoot down aircraft in a dogfight. Down aircraft in a dogfight with only guns. Fly through hoops in the air as fast as you can, and this mission actually is reused for the tutorial of Ace Combat 5. Then have a fight with the 5 members of Yellow Squadron, and if you have a plane with the overly broken QAAM missiles like the S-37A or the XO2, you can beat them in under a minute very quickly. And what do you get for completing these trial missions? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I guess if you have friends you could compete for high scores, but this mode really does feel like it was just something tacked on towards the end of development as a way to blow off steam and have some fun in the development studio. At the end of the day, what can you say about Ace Combat 4 that hasn't been said already? It is, as many considered, the peak of the franchise, where the game had the right amount of balance between action and the story. This game holds a lot of nostalgia for me as well, as it was one of the first times I ever got to play the franchise that I would fall in love with. Sure, yes, there were a couple of missions that were a letdown, as it sort of felt like running headfirst into a brick wall after having one of the most action-packed missions right before it, and there was one mission that was so obscenely dark that I had to boost the brightness in the emulator just to make sure I could see where I was flying. But at the end of the day, Ace Combat 4 was the near-perfect soft reboot that the franchise needed, with a story-framing device that juxtaposes perfectly against the heavier action-focused gameplay. It really is a game that earns its spot as one of the most beloved entries in the entire franchise. It also sets out a lot of the groundwork that we would see in future titles, as Project Aces slowly began to expand on the Ace Combat universe. Plus, it has one hell of a soundtrack with songs that hold up to this very day for being amazing. Personally, Ace Combat 4 is my favorite game in the franchise, so every chance that I get to play the game, it is honestly going to be fun and I will always enjoy my time with it. Now, you are probably wondering as a viewer, why did I redo the video for Ace Combat 4? The old one was perfectly fine, and that is because I wasn't happy with the original product. From the gameplay that was wonky with the wrong aspect ratio to a lot of errors in the voiceover and script, I felt like I didn't do the legendary game justice. Sure, it was a video I worked really hard on, but just because I put a ton of effort in doesn't mean that I did a good job. It just means I sunk time into it. But this video I hope will be a much better viewing experience, and right afterwards it's on to Ace Combat 5 and 0, and a few of the smaller games in between. After all, if there's lore in Strange Rail, I want to uncover it. And this has been Kurokeet, and I will be signing out now. Peace.